Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M. S. Pearce, Ukraine War News Update. First part there of the 31st of March 2025. We're going to start with the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find a link to those caveats in the description to the video below. We have lower numbers than we have seen the last few days. The last 4 days, 3 of which were really crazy high, one which was fairly high, have shown that I think there's been a real flurry of activity along the front line, and perhaps yesterday things just calmed down a little bit. The Russians may have exhausted their momentum, or not really momentum, because I think the Ukrainians had more of the momentum over the last 2 weeks, and I think the Russians just tried to throw everything at them over the last few days. But there's been lots of footage of different attacks and activity along the front line where we hadn't seen as much footage in the preceding weeks. 1,230 personnel lost is obviously fairly high still, but not as high as it was. We're up to 1,700. 4 tanks, 3 troop-carrying AFVs, both very low numbers. 30 artillery systems, that's 1.5 times the daily average, still fairly significant there, but lower than we have seen it. 1 anti-aircraft warfare system and 65 vehicles and fuel tanks. So right across the board, lower numbers there. We have, what do we have here? Interesting claim that the special forces in Kursk region, so the Ukrainian special forces, have captured some Russians. They said they were going to storm Ukrainian positions and found themselves almost in front of the place where one of the groups of the Special Forces Ranger Regiment was located. Normally you get captured soldiers when you are attacking, but it looks like here the Russians were attacking, but they just attacked into a place that wasn't too good for them, and they ended up getting captured. So I don't think this time it does signify the Ukrainians were on the attack. However, the Russians did have some of their troops captured, as according to this claim. I won't show you the footage here because I get into trouble for that, but you can find all of these links in the video below. In the description to the video below, on March the 27th, Russian troops wiped out their own men after failing an initial assault. They attempted another attack, deploying infantry near the same positions. However, instead of advancing, their own BMP opened fire on them, eliminating their own forces on the spot. Not the first time we've seen that happen. The fog of war, confusion and everything. I'm sure these issues happen on both sides, and on every side in war, really. Friendly fire is an issue, that's for sure. But yeah, there we have Russians mowing down their own soldiers. That'll be adding to the list, no doubt, as well. Partisan burned a Russian electronic warfare complex, the Lorandit, in the temporarily occupied Kherson region. Main intelligence director at the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine has stated. I don't know how big a Lorandit is. If we put Lorandit electronic warfare, partisan burn. So here's the account of it. Yeah, not really sure how big a Lorandit is, but doesn't look like it's a massive complex. It's going to be attached or towed by, here you got Bukanka. So I'm not really sure, to be honest. But anyway, some partisan activity taking place there, burning down some equipment. That's what we like to see, of course. Good stuff there. That is on a tripod, isn't it? So it is a fairly small bit of kit, but that's really good. That will allow the Ukrainians to get some drones through in that area and cause some mayhem for the Russians. Now, we have a 36-second video here of all sorts of targets being struck by GBU-39s, SDB, small diameter bombs, GBU-62, JDAMs, so different types of guided glide bombs being used to hit the Russian targets in a number of places. I don't know if this is reflective of the idea that the Ukrainians are using more guided glide bombs. I've said that recently because there is more footage out there, but it could be them trying to push the footage as a not psyops, I don't know if that's the right word, but trying to push the narrative that they are being really successful in their aerial support. I don't know. I do get the sense that with the F-16s and the Mirages, the Ukrainians have more ability to use the munitions that they had. I wonder whether they had more munitions. Like the Americans have provided quite a few, I'm pretty sure, JDAMs and GBU-39s, these small diameter bombs, and of course the French have provided quite a lot of the AASM Hammer bombs, probably more than they had the ability to drop in a given day. Right, so when they've only got some MiG-29s and a couple of Sukhois or whatever, but their forces have been attrited, and yes, there was a claim they had more pilots than planes to be able to fly. When you suddenly get a bunch of F-16s and Mirages, then oh hello, we can now drop a load more bombs, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are indeed using guided glide bombs an awful lot more than they were, due to having more airframes to drop them. Now, talking about dropping guided glide bombs, there has been an explosion at a Russian cemetery, as it appears the Russians have dropped yet again, not for the first time, a guided glide bomb in their own territory. So, Russian VKS pilots reportedly dropped a guided bomb on a cemetery in the village of Ivanovskaya Lisitsa in Belgorod, in the Belgorod Oblast. Right, moving on to strikes. Last night was a fairly typical night, and actually another night where the Ukrainians have struggled to intercept at the sorts of rates that we were used to previously. Worrying news, says Tim White, from the overnight drone attack, with Ukraine admitting only a 22%, not only admitting that 22% of the drones did get through their air defense. So 131 were fired, so a fairly significant number, of course. 57 shot down and 47 falling harmlessly. That leaves 29 hitting their targets. 29 out of 131 is a pretty significant number. That's, goodness me, 30 drones. And I've shown you some footage of these drones exploding. These are big explosions these days on these drones. So 29 drones getting through is a real challenge for the Ukrainians. I was saying yesterday, I'm actually genuinely worried about how many drones are getting through and how much damage that's going to do, both in concrete terms, literally concrete terms, as well as to the psyche of the Ukrainian people. Now, the analyst here on Blue Sky says Russian attacks on civilian targets rage on. As drones fly towards the target, they wait just beyond it, loitering until enough of them arrive. Then, from an altitude of 2,000 meters, they plunge towards their targets to overwhelm the local defenses. Added to this tactic is that the latest have far larger warheads, up from 30 kilograms to 90 kilograms. So these are 3 times more explosive. So when they hit, it's even more devastating. This is why the latest raids on homes, schools, electrical equipment and hospitals have been so damaging and violent. Yet this isn't what makes 47 angry, so Donald Trump, or makes him speak out. It's Putin's anti-Zelenskyy speech. Not even that Putin announced he was going to crush Ukraine with another all-year offensive due to start on as the ground dries out. And for some reason, that's now beyond me, Ukraine has not responded to these drone attacks with their own. Yeah, so this is interesting. We have had much quieter nights, at least there have been no big announcements, nothing coming through on the socials with regard to what Ukraine has been doing with regard to striking Russia. There's the claim last night that an airfield has been targeted, but as soon as the ceasefire came along, we stopped hearing about wide-scale attacks on Russia. Interesting. But anyway, the analyst continues. Ukraine has not responded to these drone attacks with their own. I hope they're saving up their drones for a massive strike on Moscow. It's time they felt what this is like and what it means to keep this war going. So that's a kind of bit of a, not a rant, but a frustrated, the analyst there, talking about the situation with regard to the Russians heavily hitting Ukraine. Andrew Perpetua says, I was reliably informed about a ceasefire on the energy infrastructure. In response to this quote or this statement: a high voltage power line was knocked out and summer houses were damaged. These are the consequences of the enemy attack on the Zaporizhia region. 10 houses of the territory of the summer cottage cooperatives were damaged as a result of enemy shelling. There's no electricity supply in part of the village of Kherson. Energy workers are doing everything possible to eliminate the consequences of the attack as soon as possible. Of course, that looks rather like energy infrastructure being hit, but there you go. 5 Shahed drone attacks hit Kievsky district in Kharkiv. So Kharkiv was certainly targeted last night, injuring 3 men and damaging 5 industrial buildings and 11 apartment blocks. The blast wave shattered about 100 windows, and in 2 kindergartens, windows were blown out along with their frames, according to the mayor. So kindergartens, residential blocks, and some industrial enterprises as well were hit, typically by the Russians. What a big explosion this evening in Dobropilya in Free Donetsk. So I presume something big was targeted in Dobropilya. So the Russians then, they're having some more success. You could surmise the town is about 25 kilometers north of Pokrovsk. A really big explosion there. Now, on the other hand, overnight, Ukrainian drones reportedly attacked Shaikovka airfield in Russia's Kaluga region. Damage assessment is ongoing, so not sure if any damage was done there, and if so, what the damage was. A fire also burns in occupied Berdyansk. Locals suggest it's where Russia had an S-300 air defense system. This is a view from the city with the fire on the spit of land that curves around the port city. There was no air raid warning, so it may be a faulty drone launch or friendly fire or some such thing. But it could have just been a very precise strike on an S-300 system there. And no reports show some firm data saying a fire broke out today on the taxiway of Kerch airfield or airport in occupied Crimea. Russian authorities and emergency services have remained silent on the incident, but there was some fire there. One could also make the assumption that something was sent into that airfield. Take some target out. Astrakhan in Russia is burning. Not quite sure what this is. It looks fairly significant. It could just be a random fire. It could be some kind of strike. It could be a careless Russian smoker or sabotage or whatever. But I don't know. It is something burning in Astrakhan in Russia there on the side of the water. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. We're going to start with Russia's main strategy may now be to exhaust Ukraine's forces across the entire front line rather than achieve operational successes, says the 3rd Army Corps Commander Beletsky. The goal, to wear down Ukraine's military and to morally wear them down as well, to force capitulation or collapse the front. There always are these fairly mutually exclusive ideas. So you've heard recently the claim that the Russians are tooling up, they are amassing their forces, and they're going to attack maybe in the summertime after it's dried out, the ground has dried out, and they're going to have some major breakthroughs in a number of areas. And then you've got this guy saying, actually, I don't think it's going to be about breaking through, it's about just getting us to capitulate by wearing us down, both in terms of material and personnel, as well as psychologically, wear us down, and then eventually we'll just capitulate. Two different approaches to, or two different understandings of what's going on the front line and what potentially might take place. 1 year is all Putin needs. Russia may mobilize a huge army again after Ukraine peace deal, says Dutch intelligence. NATO's Baltic members face the highest risk. So this is building on what I've been reporting a couple of times recently, where you've got those in the Baltic nations saying, yeah, we're a bit worried that if the ceasefire actually works eventually, that the Russians might use that to amass forces that they could attack elsewhere and leave the Ukrainian front line. They could be looking at taking that land corridor on the way to Kaliningrad. And here we have the Dutch intelligence warning that such a situation could well be possible. Here we have American officials being furious when Ukraine successfully struck the Russian cruiser, the Moskva. So New York Times has written has a substantial piece in it discussing how the attack angered some American politicians because the Ukrainians did not warn them about it. We've heard this a number of times, the same with Kursk, the attack into Kursk. But it seems that the most successful things the Ukrainians have done, they've done without telling the Americans. The Americans appeared to convince them to attack down into Robotna towards Melitopol and Tokmak, and that counteroffensive didn't quite work out to plan. So it could be that the Ukrainians are like, well, you know what, when we decide to do things ourselves, they end up being more successful. So, yeah. They were also surprised that Ukraine had the missiles for this. In fact, Tim White talks about this article. I've just finished reading a very long article in New York Times, which seems very well sourced, telling what it says, the story of the sometimes strained relationship between Ukraine and the US during the war. And I did talk you through some of this yesterday. I talked you through some of the timeline for this article. The highlight is probably the exchange when Ukraine sank the Moskva. Reading the whole thing, one is left with an overriding thought that this war would have ended swiftly had leaders of the Allies, particularly US, been more decisive. That has been my view all along. Screenshots from the start of the New York Times stories. I mean, you can go and read that yourselves or look at these screenshots on Tim White's thread here. One later point, a disagreement between Zelenskyy and Syrskyi. This is what I reported yesterday. The US and the New York Times seemingly laid the blame at Zelenskyy's door for the failed counterattack, claiming he divided resources instead of concentrating on Melitopol or Bakhmut. So Syrskyi wanted it in Bakhmut, and Zelenskyy wanted it in Melitopol, which is in line with what the Americans wanted. I said yesterday that I don't think, and Andrew Perpetua is really adamant about this. He's excoriated the Ukrainians for attacking in the Melitopol direction, which is what Zelenskyy seemed to have wanted. But I don't know that the Bakhmut direction would have been that, which just would have been a defensive thing more than anything. Both Perpetua and myself suggested a number of places that would have been better to attack, but hey, I'm just an armchair general, so what do I know? But I think history has shown that Melitopol was not the sensible option. President Trump, now, I reported this as a breaking news update last night. So Trump said he is very angry, pissed off at Putin, and is prepared to place new sanctions on Russian oil. So this is really potentially good news for Ukraine. But, okay, and we'll get to the but in a second. Trump told NBC that his anger was sparked after comments made by Putin Friday questioning Ukrainian President Zelenskyy's credibility. If we're in the midst of negotiation, you could say that I was very angry, pissed off when Putin said yesterday that, when Putin started getting into Zelenskyy's credibility, because that's not going in the right location, you understand? Bit jumbled there, but, it's what we expect. Trump told NBC News' Kristen Welker during a phone interview on Sunday. He said, if Russia and I are unable to make a deal on stopping the bloodshed in Ukraine, and if I think it was Russia's fault, which it might not be, this is already trying to give excuses there for Russia, but if I think it was Russia's fault, I'm going to put secondary tariffs on all oil coming out of Russia. Now, that would be absolutely brilliant, right? And I was reporting last night that, it could be somewhat unlikely, knowing where Trump has come from and where all the people around him have been saying. But that could be really good news. It could have been prompted, I suggested last night, by Keir Starmer's telephone call to Trump yesterday. He needs an influx of new information that comes from outside his own information ecosystem. And actually, world leaders are the rare opportunity for that information to reach him. But actually, as someone, and of course, I even reported this yesterday, but as some on my thread said, it could well have come from Alexander Stubb. So Alexander Stubb was playing golf with Trump the day before. And honestly, this is absolutely staggering. I'm going to come to the Stubb bit in fact, let's come to Stubb now. So President Alexander Stubb held a press conference in London, shared details about his meeting with Trump. So remember, they played golf, they won a golf tournament together, but that is where you do a lot of diplomacy with Trump on the golf course. Quote, the meeting was useful. We had two themes. The first was bilateral relations between Finland and the USA. The second was Ukraine, especially Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, he said. According to Stubb, Trump asked whether asked him whether Putin could be trusted. I replied that he couldn't. Now, you could just read that and think, okay, right, yeah. But holy crap, that statement there is much more important than you'd think. The fact that Trump has to ask whether Putin can be trusted means that Trump doesn't have a clue about Putin. He's got an absolutely warped opinion of Putin. That you ask most humans on this earth, can Putin be trusted? And most humans are going to tell you, well, no. Like, we've all got a pretty good understanding that he breaks treaties and he breaks ceasefires. Who is it? Mike Clark on Sky News said the other day that he's broken 190 treaties and ceasefires over a whatever year period. Right? We all know Putin can't be trusted. He's a former KGB agent, for feck's sake. So I don't know how you could be the president of the United States and ask another world leader, Finnish world leader, do you think Putin can be trusted? No, obviously not. The fact that he had to ask him that shows you where his head is at. Shows you that he's really credulous of everything that Putin claims. Which shows you that he's not naturally aligned to Ukraine one iota. Incredible. President Stubb said he emphasised that a ceasefire must be reached and that a firm date is needed. He said Finland believes that April the 20th would be a suitable date for a full unconditional ceasefire. Also, Stubb said a strong sanctions mechanism is needed as an incentive for the ceasefire, which should be in place if Russia does not agree to the ceasefire or violates it. Now you have Trump saying, we're going to put secondary oil sanctions on Russia if X, Y, and Z. This seems to be coming from Alexander Stubb. Of course, Trump has a recency bias, doesn't he? Where he just listens to what the last person told him said. He just regurgitates that. I think Trump was regurgitating Alexander Stubb. Quote, Trump is quite impatient with Russia's actions, this kind of scheming and delaying regarding the ceasefire. I tried to explain that this is completely normal Russian behaviour. So again, not understanding that that is the sort of thing that Russia does and is going to do. We know this. We talk about this all the time. Trump, who should be listening to the very best intelligence in the world, doesn't know this. Honestly, this is so important. Stubb also emphasised that Russia only understands force, which requires sanctions and the use of frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. And that's reported in Finnish media. So then you have this. So after saying on NBC that he's really pissed off, he's on Air Force One and he says to reporters, you're talking about Putin. I don't think he's going to back on his word. I don't think he's going to go back on his word. Sorry. So in other words, I'm now back to believing him. So I've almost forgotten now that Stubb and Starmer have spoken to me. And now I'm back to my default thinking pattern. I don't think he's going to go back on his word. I've known him for a long time. We've always gotten along well. I certainly wouldn't want to put secondary tariffs on Russia, but if they were put on, it would not be very good for them. So he's just starting he's gone from I'm angry, I'm really pissed off to, I don't think they're going to go back on their word. Absolutely incredible. As Noel Report says, Trump, aka the extortionist, continues his mafia tactics. And in that same journey on Air Force One, he's now threatened Zelenskyy. So he's gone back to softer rhetoric on Russia and threatening Zelenskyy again. He's trying to back out the rare earth metals agreement, and if he does, he'll have very big problems. I think Zelenskyy, by the way, I see he's trying to back out the rare earth deal, and if he does, he's got some problems. We made a deal on rare earth, and now he's saying, well, I want to negotiate the deal. Now, my speculation on this is Trump will not know the details of the minerals deal. That all of those documents will not have been read to him. He'll just be thinking, right, we've got this deal, he needs to sign it. But he won't have constructed that deal. That deal would have been constructed by people who are truly extortionist over, as Trump himself might be, but the details will be lacking. I keep trying to tell you, and although this is speculation from me, I'm pretty certain the case will be that he has no wide or deep understanding of all of these topics. And so therefore, when talking about the rare earth minerals deal, he'll be talking about it in huge generalities. Just almost like, I know it's a good deal, and they're refusing to sign this deal, therefore they suck. Without understanding that his side has put in an absolutely insane deal that is akin to absolute extortion. And then he says the US and Russia are discussing rare earth metal extraction. Well, actually, he doesn't. Dmitriev, the guy that's in charge of sort of international trade cooperation and whatnot, who's also been at the negotiations, says. So Dmitriev has said that the US and Russia are discussing rare earth metal extraction. Talks include joint projects in the sector. Meanwhile, Trump softens his tone on Putin, saying he trusts him and believes in his willingness to make peace. So you've got this really schizophrenic Trump that's gone from really angry with Putin back to slagging off Zelenskyy, doing deals with both sides, trying to extract rare earth minerals out of Ukraine while doing trade deals with Russia, and then saying, yeah, well, if Putin does go back on his word, we'll hit him with secondary tariffs, but I don't think he will. I trust him. We're good mates. He's all right, old Poots. And that's where you're at. Absolutely incredible. Right, last thing to say, Moscow Metro website's been hacked. This is probably a bit of a tit for tat. So I don't know if you remember that long word, the Ukzalnitsia, basically Ukrainian railway, was hacked, and it was taken out for some time. Their systems were taken out for some time. They did manage to keep the trains going through just, I think, paying locally or whatever. But in a time where websites are really important for trade and for booking, that would have really hurt the Ukrainian railway system. So that was taken out for a good few days. Moscow Metro has been hit, and when you try to access it, it redirects you to the Ukrainian railway page, which I think is delightful. The card also does not load. Payments do not go through machines and validators on buses either. So, wow, that's a bit of a problem for the Muscovites there, and a bit of retaliation from the Ukrainians. Anyway, that's enough from me. Really appreciate your support. Take care, guys, and I will speak to you soon. Don't forget that we do have a Car for Ukraine. I haven't launched this yet. I'm going to see if I can get time to do that today. Do you have a Car for Ukraine campaign that started as part of the Easter Pisanki campaign for loads of different fundraisers, loads of different YouTubers? Here we are in 7th position at the moment, and that's without having done any fundraising. So that's really cool, or not without really having talked about it. If we click on our one here, you can see all of the details and look at all the videos. I will try and play you some of those and share this with you more formally, as I say, hopefully later today. But in the meantime, that is there if you have any desire and wherewithal ability to contribute. That'd be absolutely fantastic. In the meantime, take care, guys. Speak to you soon.